My name is Serena Aldridge, 30 years old. My mother-in-law told me I wasn't allowed on the family trip the same way someone might mention it looked like rain, casual, thoughtless, as if the words didn't have the power to rearrange my entire understanding of where I stood in this family. We were standing in her kitchen, the one she always bragged about having designed herself, while I helped her arrange flowers for her anniversary party. My husband Theo was upstairs with his dad, allegedly fixing a leaky faucet and laughing at old stories. The cabin only sleeps six comfortably, she said as she fluffed a white rose and tucked it into the centerpiece. And with both my sons, their father, me, and the grandchildren, well, you can see the math doesn't work. For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. I stood there holding a fistful of baby's breath, the tiny flowers suddenly feeling absurdly fragile between my fingers. We'd been married for 3 years. I'd spent every holiday at their house, washed dishes in this kitchen until my hands went numb, listened to her complain about book club and her neighbors and her cholesterol. I'd helped my father-in-law set up his phone, his laptop, even his smart TV, because, Serena, you're just so good with these things. I'd brought dessert, remembered birthdays, written thank you notes. I had done everything you're supposed to do to become family. Apparently, that promotion had never gone through. What about Violet? I asked, trying to keep my voice light, as if this was a logistics question and not an existential one. Violet had been with Theo's brother for 4 years. She was over here almost as much as we were. Oh, she's not coming either, my mother-in-law said brightly, like that detail made everything fair. It's always been that way. She moved on to another vase, humming under her breath. Except it hadn't always been that way. I'd seen the photos. Grainy prints from the 80s and 90s in frames lining the hallway, glossy ones from the early 2000s in carefully curated albums. Theo's grandmother at the cabin. Aunts, uncles, spouses, all crammed together on a rickety dock, sunburned and smiling. Every woman who'd married into the family had been included. Women with maiden names no one even remembered anymore were in those photos. I was the one being left out, me and Violet, the first ones. I didn't tell Theo that night. I watched from our bedroom doorway as he packed his duffel bag on the bed, humming under his breath, our 5-year-old daughter jumping around him with the exaggerated excitement only little kids can manage. "Daddy, are we going to catch a big fish?" she asked, eyes wide. "The biggest," he laughed, tapping the end of her nose. He kept talking about how he couldn't wait to teach her to fish at the cabin, like when I was a kid, and every time he said it, something tightened in my chest. I could have stopped him. I could have said, "By the way, your mom told me I'm not invited because I'm not real family." I could have watched his face and measured how quickly he defended her. Instead, I swallowed it. I smiled when he kissed me goodbye on the porch. I waved as our daughter blew me sticky-fingered kisses from the back seat. I told myself I'd talk to him when they got back, when it didn't feel like I was punishing him and our daughter for something his mother had done. But I didn't just sit and wait. As he pulled out of the driveway, I pulled out my phone and opened the family tracking app we'd set up for emergencies. It had seemed like a good idea at the time. Theo traveled for work sometimes, and it made us both feel better to see that little dot moving safely along the map. I watched it now, that tiny circle with his initials in it, crawling north on the interstate. Wisconsin, I thought. The cabin by the lake. The place I had heard 100 stories about, but never seen. Except the dot didn't stop in Wisconsin. 6 hours later, it stopped 3 states away in Minnesota. I zoomed in, narrowing the map. It wasn't anywhere near the pin Theo's family always referred to as the cabin. It was on a completely different lake. I switched apps and typed the resort name into my browser. The Grandview Lodge, 5-star accommodations, spa services, golf course, kids club. This wasn't a rustic little cabin where everyone squeezed into bunk beds and cooked over a fire pit. This was a carefully curated resort experience. The website proudly advertised their family reunion package: premium suites, catered meals, professionally staged family photos on the lake at sunset. My stomach dropped. I dug through a stack of mail on the counter, the one my mother-in-law had asked me to help her sort the week before, because these online statements confuse me. I found her latest credit card bill and flipped through the pages until I saw it. A $3,000 deposit to the Grandview Lodge, listed under Vacation and Family Event. This wasn't casual. This wasn't some last-minute upgrade from the cabin because of a plumbing problem or a double booking. This had been planned, paid for, arranged, and every woman who had married into the family had been deliberately excluded. My hands shook as I scrolled through the resort's photos. Large suites big enough to hold more than 6 people. Long tables set up for group dining. A caption read, "Celebrate your legacy with the ones who matter most." Apparently, I did not qualify. I called Violet. She picked up on the first ring. "Did you know they're not at the cabin?" I asked. No preamble. "They're at some resort in Minnesota." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then, "How did you find out?" Her voice was tight. "I tracked Theo's phone," I said, "and I saw the charge on your boyfriend's mom's statement, the Grandview Lodge, family reunion package." "I know," she whispered. "I found receipts last week." She hesitated. "But it's worse than you think." A cold prickle ran down my spine. "What do you mean?" "Check your husband's email," she said. "The password is his mom's birthday. Trust me." I shouldn't have. I knew that. Logging into Theo's account felt like crossing a line I'd spent years trying not to even walk near. But lines look different when you realize the people on the other side of them have been drawing maps without you. My heart hammered as I sat at my laptop and typed in his address, then his mother's birth date. The screen flickered, then opened. There, buried in a folder labeled Family Matters, were dozens of emails. Threads between Theo, his brother, and his parents. Messages about the trip, about how to keep me and Violet away without causing drama. Lines about protecting family assets from outsiders, a phrase that made me physically flinch. But that wasn't what made my blood run cold. It was an email from 2 weeks ago. The subject line read, "Updated trust documents." I clicked it open. My father-in-law's lawyer had attached a new draft of the family trust. The family business, the properties, the investment accounts, everything was being reorganized. And according to these documents, only blood relatives would inherit. Daughters-in-law were explicitly excluded. My eyes scanned the legal language, tripping over phrases like lineal descendants and non-blood-related spouses, my brain, trying to translate it into real life. The trip wasn't just a vacation, it was a signing ceremony. They were gathering at a 5-star resort to finalize the paperwork that would cut me out of everything, including my own daughter's inheritance, unless certain conditions were met. Conditions no one had bothered to mention to me. Conditions I hadn't agreed to. The phone buzzed in my hand. A text from Theo popped up on the screen. "Miss you. Caught a huge bass. Wish you were here." I stared at the message, at the photo of him and our daughter smiling on a boat, at the lie sitting beneath it all. 3 years of family dinners and holidays, 3 years of me believing I belonged, and somewhere in a lakeside suite, they were planning how to make sure I never really did. I took a deep breath, opened my laptop wider, and started reading every word of those trust documents. The trust documents were dense, pages and pages of legal jargon, clauses nested inside subclauses, long sentences written by people who assumed the reader either had a law degree or blind faith. I didn't have either, but anger does something curious to the mind. It sharpens you, focuses you, makes the incomprehensible suddenly readable. Lines began to take shape. Implications started to click. My pulse pounded in my ears as I scrolled, stopping when a sentence halfway down the page snagged my attention. A single line, buried so deep in subsection C that most people would have missed it, hit me like a physical blow. I reread it. Then again, my stomach dropped. A loophole, a gigantic, unbelievable loophole. The trust automatically transferred to spouses upon death if they were legally married at the time of signing. That meant this whole orchestrated scheme to exclude daughters-in-law only worked if the sons stayed alive and married. But if anything happened to either Theo or his brother, the spouses they were trying to erase would inherit everything by default. Whoever drafted these documents had either been careless, or someone had sabotaged the trust from the inside. My phone buzzed with a notification. "Violet, on my way." She arrived 20 minutes later, hair pulled into a messy bun, eyes swollen like she'd been crying or unable to sleep, or both. She walked into my kitchen and froze when she saw the mountain of printed emails, financial statements, and trust documents spread across my dining room table. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You found a lot more than I did." "Sit," I said. We spent the next hour sorting papers, cross-referencing email chains, highlighting clauses that contradicted other clauses. My daughter slept upstairs, blissfully unaware that her family tree was in the middle of an earthquake. Show me what you found, Violet said, voice tight. I pointed to section 7, subsection C. Read this part. Her eyes scanned the text, then widened. Oh my God. Exactly. They're trying to cut us out now, she said slowly. But if anything happens to them, we automatically inherit, I finished. Everything. She sat back hard in her chair. This doesn't protect them at all. It just pisses us off. It gets better. I reached for another document. Look at the business structure. Her boyfriend's name appeared on a chart. Company stock listed under him. Your boyfriend's company stock is held jointly, I said. And guess what? Minnesota is a community property state for certain business assets acquired during common law marriage. Violet blinked. We're not married. You've lived together 4 years, I said, pulling up the statute. Filed joint taxes, shared bank accounts, bought a dog together. Legally, Minnesota considers situations like yours as qualifying for property rights. Her hands shook. So, what do we do? The better question was, what didn't we do? I pulled up another folder in Theo's email. Look at this. One email from his brother read, Mom's right. We need to protect family assets from outsiders. Violet stared at the word outsiders. Her voice cracked. Outsiders? I've spent 4 years helping him build his business. I helped his mother plan her heart surgery recovery. I've watched her grandkids. Outsiders? There wasn't anything I could say to cushion the blow, but I could show her the truth. There's more, I said quietly. The life insurance policies. She exhaled sharply. Oh no. Theo's names me as beneficiary, I explained. But there's a clause that reverts everything to his parents if he dies within 5 years of our marriage and if we divorce before that. Violet went still. His brother has the same clause. It says if we're not married at the time of his death, his parents get the entire payout. Her face drained of color. Jesus Christ. I clicked to another folder. And this. Her eyes widened when she saw the loan documents. Your father-in-law's company took out a $2 million loan? Collateralized by the family business, I said. But the personal guarantors are Theo and his brother. Meaning, if the business defaulted, the sons were on the hook. But the trust? The trust moved assets in a way that protected the parents and shifted the risk downward. Violet whispered. They set their own sons up to take the fall. We both sat in stunned silence. The kind of silence that feels too loud because of everything unsaid behind it. At 2 a.m, my dad called. He'd apparently stayed up reading every document I'd sent him. His voice was calm but tight. Honey, you need your own lawyer, not theirs. I have one, I said. Good, he replied. Because what they're doing is legal in structure but fraudulent in intention. They're trapping you. You need to protect yourself. Dad, if I leave Theo... I'm not telling you to leave him, he said gently. I'm telling you to stop standing unprotected in a house full of people who aren't protecting you. After we hung up, I didn't sleep. Neither did Violet. We organized everything into a timeline. The Christmas we got gift cards while blood relatives got jewelry. The baby shower where my mother-in-law announced she was creating a college fund for my daughter, but only I'll manage it. Times we'd been excluded, corrected, talked over, forgotten. Every email about keeping us out. By sunrise, the table was buried in evidence. At 6 a.m., I finally heard the email alert. My lawyer had responded. 2 sentences. This is actionable. Call me when you're ready to proceed. I stared at the words. A shiver ran down my spine. This, I whispered to Violet, is the moment they made the biggest mistake of their lives. By the time dawn seeped through the blinds, the table looked like a war room. Papers spread everywhere, highlighted text glowing in neon, our laptops open to statutes, bank statements, email threads, and trust clauses. I hadn't slept. Violet hadn't either. But exhaustion had a strange way of sharpening everything. Fear, anger, clarity. In 12 hours, Theo would be home, with our daughter, with photographs of memories they wanted to make without me. I sat at the kitchen island, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee I wasn't drinking. I watched the sky struggle from gray to pink and tried to imagine what I would say when he walked through the door. When his car finally pulled into our driveway at 7 p.m., I watched from the window. He lifted our daughter out of her seat, her cheeks rosy from the sun, her hair wild and wind-tangled. She was glowing, thrilled from a weekend that had been magical for her and gutting for me. I opened the door before they could knock. Welcome home, I said. Theo kissed me, warm and easy. You would have loved it. The lake was perfect. Next year. Right, I said. The lake. At Grandview Lodge? He froze. Not in a dramatic, guilty way. Just a tiny hitch. A split-second pause. The kind a person makes when their brain tries to catch up with the lie they forgot they told. What? He said. The resort in Minnesota, I replied. The one that costs $500 a night. I watched the color drain from his face. Theo, I said softly, I tracked your phone. His mouth opened, closed. I can explain. Don't. I stepped back so he could walk inside, because what you were doing isn't something you explain with a sentence or two. I pulled out my laptop, already open to the folder labeled Family Matters, the emails, the trust documents, the financial trails. I know where you were, I said. I know what you were doing, and I know about the trust. He blinked hard like he'd been slapped. You went through my email? You plotted with your family to cut your wife and daughter out of everything you've built together, I said. I think invading your privacy falls pretty low on the list of wrongdoing here. He sank onto the couch, elbows on his knees. I didn't think it was like that. I pulled up one of the emails. Mom says we have to protect the family assets from outsiders. Theo's brother. Serena won't understand. Let's keep it simple. Keep the trip quiet. He grabbed his hair with both hands. Oh my God. Did you read the documents? I asked. I skimmed. Dad's lawyer said, You skimmed. I shoved the printed trust in front of him. Here, read. He read. He paled. His breathing shook. This says, if we divorce before year 6, my parents get my life insurance? Yes. And if I die before then, they get everything. He stared at the page as if it might catch fire. Then I reached behind me and handed him the business loan. What's this? The $2 million loan your father took out. The collateral is the family business. He scanned the page. Wait, this says I'm personally liable? You and your brother, I said quietly, but the trust protects your parents' assets, not yours. Theo looked up at me. Why would they do this? Because they were protecting themselves, I said, and using you to do it. His voice broke. They set me up. I softened. Just a fraction. He looked like a man slowly coming to terms with the fact that the people he trusted most had used him as a shield. What do we do? He whispered. You start by admitting that what your family did was wrong, I said, and that I'm not the outsider your mother painted me as. He nodded, swallowing hard. I'll have your back. I wanted to believe him, but belief was something that had to be rebuilt brick by brick. The next morning, my lawyer Patricia met us outside his parents' house. She was crisp and calm, her presence a shield of its own. This is a family matter, my mother-in-law said at the door, eyeing Patricia like she was a venomous snake. No, Patricia said evenly. This is a legal matter, and we're here to address it. Inside, everyone had split into sides like a courtroom. Theo and I sat together. Violet and her boyfriend sat stiffly across. My father-in-law and mother-in-law perched rigidly on the couch, expressions tight. Patricia placed the revised trust documents on the table with the precision of a bomb technician. Let's begin. My father-in-law scoffed. There's nothing to discuss. The trust is finalized. No, Patricia said. It's not. You obtained signatures without proper disclosure. That alone is grounds for invalidation. My mother-in-law's face twisted. We were protecting our family. By lying to us, I said. You're not family, she snapped before she could stop herself. Wives leave. The room went dead silent. Even the ticking of the grandfather clock felt accusatory. I leaned forward. 3 years. That's how long I've been here. Showed up for everything, supported everything, but you still call me a guest in my own marriage. Theo's hand tightened around mine. Mom, he said slowly, that's not okay. She stared at him, wide-eyed, as if shocked he'd spoken. Patricia slid the revised trust across the table. This version protects your sons from liability, she said, includes all grandchildren equally, and ensures spouses' rights are respected under Minnesota law. My father-in-law read it. His expression changed. He looked relieved. This is cleaner, he admitted quietly, more protective. My mother-in-law swallowed, hard. Patricia stood. Review it with your lawyer by Friday. Until then, the current trust is considered under negotiation and not binding. It was the closest thing to victory we'd had. Not a win, not yet, but a shift. When we walked out of that house, the tension still clinging to our clothes, Violet grabbed my hand. We did it, she whispered. We survived it, I said. There's a difference. The car ride home was quiet, the kind of quiet that hums because everything important is hanging in the air. Theo kept his eyes on the road, knuckles whitening around the steering wheel, while I stared out the window at the passing houses. Families inside them were probably laughing over dinner or watching TV, unaware that somewhere nearby a different family was sitting in the ashes of their own collapse, breathing smoke and trying to decide what could be rebuilt. When we pulled into our driveway, Theo turned off the engine but didn't move. The silence stretched between us until it felt like a wall. Finally, he let out a long, shaking breath. "I'm sorry," he said, "for everything. For not seeing what my parents were doing, for not reading the documents, for not asking questions, for choosing their comfort over your dignity." I didn't turn to him. Not yet. "Why did you?" I asked softly. "Why was it so easy for you to believe them over me?" He rubbed his face with both hands, like he was trying to scrub away the version of himself he couldn't defend. "Because it was easier," he whispered. "Because I've spent my whole life keeping the peace. Because I didn't want to believe my parents could do something like that. Because I was scared." "Of what?" "Of losing them." He swallowed hard. "And I didn't realize I was losing you instead." I finally looked at him. His eyes were glassy, desperate, but desperation wasn't enough. Not after what had happened. Not after years of subtle cuts I hadn't realized were adding up. "If we're going to move forward," I said slowly, "we need counseling. Real counseling. Not your mom's friend who thinks every marital problem is the wife's fault." "Okay." "And you need to set boundaries with your parents. Real ones. Not the kind you let them wiggle around." "Okay. And if you ever lie to me about a family trip again?" I paused. "I'm gone. No second chances." He nodded, throat tight. "I understand." We sat there in the parked car, hands intertwined in the half-dark, two people who used to know how to be married trying to relearn it from scratch. 2 weeks later, the in-laws' lawyer finally responded. They were accepting Patricia's revised trust. Every modification, every clause, every protection. For us, for Violet, for the grandchildren, for the sons who were previously left exposed. The new trust. Removed personal liability from Theo and his brother. Ensured all grandchildren were treated equally. Acknowledged spouses' rights. Required full transparency in future modifications. When I showed Theo the email, he let out a breath I didn't know he'd been holding for 2 weeks. This is good." "It's a start," I said. Then my phone buzzed. A text from his mom. "Family dinner, Sunday. Everyone invited." I stared at the words. Everyone invited. The irony wasn't lost on me. Theo read over my shoulder. "What do you think?" "I think we go," I said. "But we leave if anyone makes me uncomfortable." He nodded. "Agreed." Sunday dinner. The dining room looked the same as it always did. Too many formal place settings. Candles lit, even though it wasn't dark yet, the good china brought out as if it were a peace offering. But the energy was different. Softer around the edges. Cautious. Human. Theo's mother served roast chicken with trembling hands. His father poured wine with the solemnity of a priest. Violet and her boyfriend sat across from us, exchanging hesitant smiles. Conversation was stiff at first. Everyone danced around the giant crater in the middle of the room. The trust, the lies, the exclusion. But it was there, humming beneath every line. Then my daughter, oblivious to the tension, climbed onto a chair and looked at her grandfather. "Are we going on a family trip soon?" she chirped. The entire table froze. My father-in-law cleared his throat. "Actually, yes." He glanced at me. "A real cabin trip. The actual cabin. All of us." He hesitated. "If you'd like to come." My heart tightened. "That sounds nice," I said carefully. An olive branch, shaky but sincere. Then Theo's mother set down her wineglass and pressed her napkin into her lap with trembling fingers. "I want to say something." The room stilled. Even the ticking clock seemed to hush. She looked at me first, then at Violet, then down at her hands. "I was wrong," she said. The words came out small but heavy. "About excluding you. About calling you outsiders. About everything. I thought I was protecting my family, but I was just hurting it." Her voice wavered. "You're not outsiders. You're our daughters. And I'm sorry it took all of this to make me see that." It wasn't eloquent, it wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that mattered. After dinner, while Theo buckled our daughter into her car seat, Violet pulled me aside in the driveway. "You know what the craziest part is?" she said. "We almost didn't fight back. We almost just accepted being treated like that." "But we didn't," I said. She smiled. "No, we didn't." We hugged. Two women who'd been pushed to the margins and pushed back harder. On the drive home, Theo reached over and laced his fingers with mine. The streetlights flashed across his face, revealing exhaustion, hope, regret, and something like determination. "We still have a long way to go," he said quietly. "We do," I agreed. But for the first time in weeks, maybe months, it felt like we might actually walk that road on the same side. A family rebuilt, not on fear or control, but on truth, and that was worth fighting for.